In this presentation, we will record interest income, both restricted interest income and unrestricted interest income in our not-for-profit organization in QuickBooks Desktop, QuickBooks Pro. Here we are in our QuickBooks file. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the view drop-down up top and going to the open windows list. We're going to open up the trustee trial balance first, our favorite report here. We're going to go to the reports drop down. We're going to go to the accounting and taxes, and there is that trial balance, the trustee trial balance. We're then going to change the dates to 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. That's going to be January 1st to December 31st. I'm going to change the size. It's optional for you to do if you would like to. I'm going to go to the customize reports, font tab, change font settings. So we're going to put it to 11 as the size. Okay. Yes, to relate to all fonts, and okay. So there is our trustee trial balance. If we then go to our Excel worksheet, then we see the next transaction we're focusing on, number 2. Number 2 is going to say that we have interest on investment without donor restrictions. So we basically have investments that we have in our not-for-profit organization. They are generating revenue in the form of interest. So we have interest income. That means that cash is going to be going up. And you could think about this being invested in something like CDs, savings accounts, or something like that. And then we're going to get interest on it. We need to do something with that interest. It has to increase cash, and then it's got to increase something else. So the question is then, is this interest income going to be restricted or not? So interest income on investments without donor restrictions, that's going to be a straightforward transactions. We'll increase the cash, and then we'll increase some kind of revenue account, interest income or investment income without restrictions. But if there's a restriction on it, we have interest on investment restricted for programs. So now we have the interest income, and this is often the case when there's some type of investment that's provided to a not-for-profit. They might say, hey, here's a large investment. I don't want you to take away the investment, the principal, but I want you to do something with the interest. And oftentimes in that case, they'll be very specific on what they would like you to do with the interest, right? So it's going to be for a specific program here. And then we have the interest on investment in permanent endowment. So another restriction basically, and this would be the case where there's a permanent endowment in the same, kind of scenario where they say, hey, you can't touch the principal at all. It's a permanent endowment. Here's money. You can't touch it. But the interest you make on it, you can use in some kind of restricted fashion. So that's what we will do here then. We're going to say that if we record this out, we're going to say cash will be going up by the interest income. We're going to do this with one journal entry. It might be easier to do with multiple, but we're going to do it with one. And that would be the total of these three items, the $1,991. Then we're going to say that the investment income with restrictions is going to be going up by these two amounts. Those are the two amounts that were restricted. Note we're not getting into much detail here about the type of restriction, but simply recording it in restricted income, because that's what we really need for our most basic kind of income type statement or statement of net position. And then the unrestricted amount is going to be going here. Here's the unrestricted amount. So these are both revenue type of accounts. In other words, revenue is going up, cash is going up. However, we need to break out the revenue between restricted and unrestricted. We're going to do it here with the two account types. We'll do it in QuickBooks with both two accounts and a grouping of restricted and unrestricted in terms of classes. So we'll see it in a column format as well as in a row format as seen here. Let's post this out, see what it looks like. We'll do the cash first. Cash is obviously going to be going up. So we're going to go into up top. We're going to go into the cash. So we'll be in R3. Within R3, we're going to say equals and scroll back down to that 1,991. That then increasing the cash. Then we're going to go to the investment income with donor restrictions. So investment income with donor restrictions, that's going to be in R19. Within R19, we're going to say equals, scroll over to that 1,303. That increases in the credit direction. Then we're going to go to the investment income without donor restrictions. Investment income here without donor restrictions, that's in R20, equals, we're going to point to that 688. So once again, we have the two increases over here in revenue. Revenue then increasing by both amounts. They're going to be broken out by account here. In our section, they're going to be broken out by both account and column of restricted and unrestricted in QuickBooks. Other side is going to be cash going up. How can we do that then with QuickBooks? If we go back to QuickBooks, go to the Home tab, Note that this would typically be done if you were to do this. You might think journal entry would be the way to go this, or just to basically record a deposit, possibly directly in the check register. However, we have an issue with that because if I was to do something and, like, for example, do a journal entry and go to company up top and make a journal entry, then I don't have a job field here, and I need the job field. I have a class field, but I'd like to track it by job. So this is the first time that we've got like a restricted item that we need to deal with both classes and jobs. So that means that we need to basically use one of these forms so that we can use the job field, which will be there. Why do we need to track by job? Because we're gonna want more detail on the restricted items about the type of restriction, and we would like to tie those items out to the amount in the net position section on the balance sheet. So that'll make more sense as we record this. Let's think about how we'll record it, then we'll check that out. So what we're going to do is do the same type of form we had before, because this is going to be the form, the sales receipt, which will be increasing undeposited funds and cash. So we're going to go into create sales receipt. We're going to have to set up 3 sales receipts, and that's going to, because we need 3 jobs. One's going to be for, well, there'll be 2 for 2 of the different types of restrictions, and 1 is going to be for the unrestricted. So if we set up the jobs here, if we take a look at this, we already have set up these jobs, and we'll practice setting up jobs in the next practice problem. So we'll set those up next time. Here we have the jobs set up for us, and the jobs are going to be the education program. That's going to be part of the restricted items that were set up in the prior time period. We want to put it to that job. Now, what we want to be able to focus in on here is that note that this job was open past or over the cutoff period. In other words, it was open last year, and it's still open this year, and that's going to be something we want to think about when we consider how to tie it out to the net position. So we'll keep that in mind. We're going to go to the classes, and then in the classes, we're going to say that this is going to be for the restricted. Now, note, I'm not going to put it here. You might say, hey, this is for the education program. But note that if it's unrestricted, I can then choose education program and put it into that category if it fits there. If not, I need to put it into restricted, because that's going to make it easier for us to easily come up with the report that we need, breaking out between restricted and unrestricted. So I'm going to put this into restricted. I'm going to tab through here, and I'm going to make this on the 8th. And then we're going to make up an item. So we're going to have to set up an item for this. We're going to call it investment income, and this is going to be restricted. So I'm going to copy that. So we'll copy that. Then I'm going to say tab and set this item up. We're going to say, yes, I would like to set that up. It's going to be a service type of item. We're going to have the description here. Then we need the income account, which also I'm going to set up as investment income restricted. So I'm going to say tab. We're going to set up that income type of account. It's going to be an income type of account. That's correct this time. So it's an income type of account. And then we're going to say save and close. Then we're going to set up our item, save and close. There we have it. The amount here, we have this restriction for the education. So the amount that was for education, investment income with donor restrictions, investment income on restricted for programs is the 947. So we're going to say that 947 is the amount, 947. So what's this going to do? It's going to increase undeposited funds, and it's going to put the other account as was driven here to the investment income restricted, and in the classes category, it'll be in restricted category for the income categories. So I'm going to say save and close, and yes. Then we see our 1 here because it's not deposited yet into the checking account. If we go into the trial balance, we see what has happened. We see the undeposited funds has increased, the other side going into an investment income restricted account. So that's going to be our transaction. Let's take a look at our other report, which is going to be the profit and loss by class. Reports drop down, company and financial, profit and loss by class. Changing the dates up top from a 10120 to 123120, January through December. Then we have our breakout up top. Notice now we have it in restricted. So again, note the major 2 categories we need now, if I minimize this, are going to be restricted and unrestricted. Those are going to be the major 2 categories we need. If we look at our profit and loss over here, that's kind of our required two categories for our statement of activities, right? Without donor restrictions, with donor restrictions. And so we need to break out the revenue between those two items. Then if we can break out the revenue between these items up top, the types of unrestricted items, programs, and the non-programs, the supportive type of functions, then we can do so here. So this will allow us to then minimize this option, say, hey, here's the major categories: unrestricted, restricted, more detail within the unrestricted. We do our best to give that more detail in terms of the revenue side of things. And then we are required to have more detail here is going to be on the expense side of things. So let's close this back out. We're going to keep the amount in undeposited funds. Let's go back to the home tab. So we're not going to deposit this yet. We're going to do the rest of them and then deposit them together in one lump sum. So I'm going to go back to the create invoice again, and we'll do this process again. Let's do the next restricted item. So we have the permanent endowment. That's the other job that we set up. So we're going to set it up as a job where we have that permanent endowment, and now we're going to be applying this interest income to it. The class then is going to be in restricted once again. So that's going to put it in that restricted column. And then if we go through, we'll keep the date here. And then we're going to see setting up the item. We can use the same item, which is going to be the investment income restricted. So this is another different type of restriction. That's why we need more detail up here, because this restriction item doesn't do it all for us. And we need more dimensions than that in the job and the program. And then we're going to say that this amount was for, let's see how much this was for. I just clicked the wrong tab, and let's go back to the right tab and then scroll back up and see the one when we are on. So we're picking up on number 2, the interest on investment on the permanent endowment, the $356. So $356 back to QuickBooks. We're going to put in the $356. That's what we want. What's this going to do? Increase undeposited funds. Other side driven by the class, go into investment income, or driven by the item, go into investment income. Also going to be included in the column of restricted when we think of the profit and loss by class. Let's go ahead, and then we'll think about the jobs in a little bit here. So we're going to say save and close and say yes. And then we're going to go back to the trial balance. In the trial balance, we have in undeposited funds now, those two items, double clicking on it. Then we've got these two items making up the 1303, closing that back out. The other side then going into the interest income restricted, double clicking on that. There's the interest income restricted, closing that back out. Within the profit and loss by class, if we go to the profit and loss by class, we now have the investment income for the two items in the restricted portion of it. Now, the other thing we wanted to take a look at is the jobs. Note that we have these two restricted items now. Now, when we think about the restricted items here, note there's only one column that shows the restricted items, and we have two different kinds of restrictions here. So we need to now track the restrictions. I need more detail on what's included. What type of restrictions do we have? That's what we're using the jobs for. So now that we have two restrictions, let's go to the jobs report. So there's a couple different job reports we can look at. The main one we're going to be dealing with here is we're going to go to the reports, company and financial profit and loss by job. Or you could find it here in the jobs times mileage if you want, and go to the profit and loss by job. I typically go to it up here when using a not-for-profit because it's right next to the profit and loss by class report. And so I'm going to go to the profit and loss by job. And then we're going to change the dates up top again, 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. And then we have up top our jobs. Now, I like to kind of format this report. There's a couple different ways you can format this. I'm going to go to the customers up top and go to the customer center. And this is where you can kind of adjust where the jobs are. So notice I put these two jobs under a subcategory. And so that's one way we can format it. And I can actually drag these up to the top of this field. The way to do that is put your cursor on this diamond, left click on it, drag it to the top. And that means in our job report, it'll read from left to right. And I can then minimize this job report to see kind of like the open jobs. The other way you could format this is if you would rather do so, or both format, you can in each of these jobs, I set up in the job field that it's in progress. So we can then sort them by whether they are in progress. Closing this back out, closing this back out. back to the job report, you can see now that these are up front. If I was to minimize this screen, we've got the jobs that we're concentrating on here, and then all the other stuff that we're not as concerned with, because we're concerned with this item, the investment income that is restricted. So then if we go down below, we've got the 1303 here and the jobs restricted. If we go to the profit and loss by class, you see that we have the 1303 here. So this gives us the 1303, but not the detail. Going to the profit and loss by job, if I was to expand this, we then get the detail. We get the detail between these two jobs. So the education program and the permanent endowment jobs. Now you can also sort this and filter out all this other stuff by using that class field. We can go to the customized reports up top. We can go to filters, and we want to filter by status. So I'm going to scroll down, and I'd like to filter this thing, if I may, by job status, and I think I might have passed it. So let's go back up top and scroll back down. We're looking for job status. Then I want to make just the in progress jobs, in progress, and then OK. And that'll give us just those in progress, and they've eliminated all the other stuff that we had there. Now also note that sometimes if it gets finicky and doesn't open, try widening the columns and then opening it. Sometimes that fixes it. It's not right here though. Well, that's okay. If it doesn't fix it, then you have to run the report again. I won't do it right now. No. What I want to note now though is that you need to tie this out as well. We have to think about the job running over the due date. So in other words, let's take a look at the balance sheet report. If I go to the reports up top, company and financial balance sheet standard report, and I change the dates. Let's change the dates in the customized reports up top to get a range 01/01/20 to 12/31/20, and let's make it 01/01/19. No, let's make it 20 for the current time period and say OK. Then if we scroll down, you'll notice that in the equity section down here, we have the amounts that are broken out between the permanent, the temporary, and the unrestricted. What we're going to need to do at the end of the day is roll this net income properly into these three items. And one way that we're going to be able to do that is with the job report. Because if I run the job report, so like for example, if I was to then change the date here, this net income will roll into one of these accounts. It's going to roll into the unrestricted net assets. So if I change the job report to the 21st, the next year, it'll then say, okay, now we rolled that into the unrestricted net assets because it basically closed out the books. But it didn't allocate it to where it should, which is the permanent and the temporary restricted. So the jobs report will help us to make that adjustment. It's going to roll everything into the unrestricted. The jobs report, if we make it for the whole life of the job, and let's run this report again. I'm going to close it back out. Reports, I'm going to go to company and financial, and we'll go to the profit and loss by job and change the dates. I'm going to make it from 01/01/19, the prior year, to 12/31/20. So it's running for a 2-year time period now. Let's make the font a little bit larger. I'm going to go here, fonts, font size, and we'll make it 11. Okay. Yes. Okay. So now you'll see here that it doesn't just have our investment income, but it also has the contributions that were restricted. This was in the prior time period. And this then, if we run it for the entire time period of the open jobs, will give us the total amount that we're going to have to basically tie into equity. So in other words, this report is going to be necessary for us to make sure our equity balances are okay, are correct. And we'll do that at the end of the time period. So the job report, anytime we have a restricted item, we want to post it to the job report. That will, in the current period, give us more detail on, if we look at the profit and loss by class, any item that's in the restricted profit and loss by class by breaking it out by specific restriction. And at the end of the time period, it'll help us to double check and tie out the amounts of the restricted items to what we need to post to the equity section, going to the balance sheet, or the net position section, breaking out between the items that are restricted and the items that are unrestricted. Okay, so now we're going to record the one last one, which doesn't have a restriction. So same kind of transaction, no restriction. Back to QuickBooks, we're going to go to the Home tab, we're going to go to the create the sales receipt once again. This time we're going to create another customer in order to enter this. I'm just going to call it investment income as the customer tab. We're going to add that. This time it's going to go into unrestricted, which I'm simply going to put into the fundraising. We'll tab through here. We're going to set up the item, which is going to be investment income. Let's say investment income. And this is unrestricted. And we'll say it's going to be a service type item and same description. And then we're going to put it to the account. Down here, we have investment income restricted. We need investment income unrestricted, adding that account. Tab, setting up that account. It will be an income type of account. Looks good. Save and close. And then we're going to say OK. What's this? And then we're going to pick up the amount here once again. The amount that's going to be unrestricted on investment without donor restrictions, 688. So this is going to be 688. And this is going to be increasing the undeposited funds and increasing that income account. Save and close. Yes. And then we'll go back to the trial balance. And within the trial balance, we'll have the undeposited funds increasing. And then the investment income, and this time in unrestricted. Now note, you could put it in just one investment income, break it out by class. But I like to create the two accounts because if we don't put the class in there, it's more easy for us to have kind of like that double check. So then we need to do the last thing, which is to take this undeposited amount and deposit it in the checking account. Back to the home tab. We've got 3 amounts in the deposit screen. We're going to deposit them all together by selecting it, checking off those 3 amounts, then go to the OK. We're going to deposit them together, summing up the 1991, which is our total deposit there, which we're assuming is the amount that will be on the bank statement. And we're going to say save and close and yes. And then go into the trial balance. What happens there? We got the checking account then increasing, undeposited funds going down to 0.